There are so many games and so little time to play them. I try to take in as much as I can, but my two favorites have always been Nintendo and survival horror. I love these games. I love the dense atmospheres, the tense gameplay, the deep stories, but most of all, I just love horror.
Yeah, man, talk about dang old boo, man.
I don't like fantasy, with the exception of Zelda and certain anime.
ファンタジー世界と仮定して
I like sci-fi, but it can get way up its own ass sometimes. But horror, now that's my shit. Even looking back on my favorite cartoons as a kid and some of my favorite elements of the games I played, I always loved it, even if I didn't really know it. Horror as a genre has been around forever, probably for the same reason as extreme sports or satanic cults. The thrill of being afraid and the allure of the dark side. It's come in the forms of art, literature, music, film, and games. Games are all about immersion, and fear is the most powerful emotion. So if a game can scare you, it will immerse you more than any other game.
And I base that on absolutely nothing.
Movies don't cut it for me anymore the way games do. When you watch a movie, you can shout at the screen all you want, but you have no control. You can shut your eyes or leave the room and come back when the scary part's over. But in a game, you can't just shout. You have to be the one to go in there. Horror games offer you a taste of bravery without the danger of a real situation. And I'm just kinda rambling because like I said, I fucking love them. I had to be real considerate about which game I start this series off with. Should I do my favorite one? The scariest one? The wildly popular one? And then it hit me. And it was pretty obvious.
Resident Evil.
The first one. Well, almost. 1981's 3D Monster Maze had players running from a proto-juggernaut with no form of combat. Atari's 1982 Haunted House applied the horror aesthetic to the best of its abilities. Capcom's 1989 Sweet Home was an RPG with permadeath, limited resources, and ordinary characters, and served as a base inspiration for the series featured in this video. And 1992's Alone in the Dark was a Lovecraft love letter with fixed camera angles, inventory management, and the predominant method of storytelling in horror games, the written word. But 1996 was the first time we heard the term survival horror. 1996 was the first time technology reached a point powerful enough to create an immersive enough horror atmosphere and weave it around a game that's fun to play and tells an interesting story. 1996 was the year Shinji Mikami resurrected the gaming world with the debut of his seminal series,
Resident Evil.
All the primordial horror games that came before are important pieces of history, but they haven't aged well. Nowadays, they're less fun to play and about as scary as a bowl of cereal.
Dark and disturbed? His whole life revolves around cereal.
Resi, as I affectionately call it, would spawn clones the way Doom did for first-person shooters, but how does it compare to its offspring? My first encounter with the series was the GameCube remake, now just known as Remake. I had heard that Resi pales in comparison to the games it inspired, which had already become a big part of my life. So I started the game with an attitude. I was expecting to be underwhelmed.
Oh, you fool!
I felt like I rediscovered the genre. Everything I loved about it was there. It didn't do it as well as others, but it did do it first. And still very well. And like that game, this video is a remake, and I feel like my original downplayed how important this series really is. This is the starting point of horror in video games. It spawned one of the biggest franchises ever. If there's just two words to describe it,
Good and scary!
now I don't really know the point of this show other than to talk about badass horror games. They're definitely not reviews. I guess you'd call them retrospectives. Either way, I needed to give it some structure. So I divided this show into what I see as the three pillars of survival horror: atmosphere, gameplay, and scenario.
Evil!
More than gameplay or story, atmosphere is what makes a game scary. It's what keeps you scared the entire time you're playing rather than only when an event happens resulting in a jump scare. In fact, a good atmosphere can add weight to a jump scare. It's what puts the horror in survival horror. Otherwise, it's just a survival game. Camera work, lighting, imagery, sound design, these are the ingredients of an efficient atmosphere. The series can be divided into 3 eras. We'll call them classic, action, and modern. We can also call them
Good. That's scary.
The original trilogy defined the golden age of survival horror, with fixed camera angles that blind you to whatever's making noise in front of the player. Back then, pre-rendered graphics offered smoother textures and faster loading over polygonal graphics, but the big compromise was that they prevent dynamic camera movements, so no zooming, panning, tilting, crane shots, or dolly shots. Yet the fact that they still produce such claustrophobic and blindfolding visuals with motionless angles proves their talented eye for camera placement.
So decent.
But when compared to PS2 games or even later PS1 games, you notice the static choppiness, like a film with too many cuts. Zombies are famously the main baddie, but are often accompanied by strange monsters and jumbo predators. And the loading screens, rooted in Sweet Home, became so iconic that I bet they even inspired Nintendo. Clunky controls, rough graphics, and beyond cheesy voice acting. Out of the 3 classics, the game that started it all is hardest to revisit, but that's okay because out of the 3 remakes, it's the most faithful. The GameCube was never scarier than when this was released. I usually hate pre-rendered graphics, but it was combined with real-time lighting that had such a photorealistic after effect. The Spencer's Mansion is a haunted house wonderland whose blueprint is etched in the mind of countless gamers, with the excursion to the strange cabin and mysterious bunker so foreign to the rest of the game you think, just what the fuck is going on here?
It's a conspiracy.
The original survival horror game is still amazing, but mostly because the remake keeps it amazing. Despite any problems that plague the original games, I was still given a comfortable introduction to the series. The remake is perfect, and Zero is a great little companion piece. Even the voice acting is
So decent.
Don't want to go back out there.
Don't open that door!
Get off the stage.
However, PS1 graphics don't hold back 2 or 3. They're still awesome. Many consider 2 to be the best in the series, and I'm occasionally inclined to agree. This game is like Assault on Precinct 13 with zombies. Taking place in the police station as well as the secret labs and layers it hides, it was the ultimate sequel. Better backgrounds and models. The voice acting was still cheesy but not abysmal. The zombies are just as creepy and more diverse to reflect the many citizens affected by the outbreak. They also twitch on the ground, which is super freaky but kind of confusing, like, can I walk past her? Oh god! There's a new liquor enemy reminiscent of the Hunter and another giant mutant reptile, but the real new star is the Tyrant in the second half, which leads us to the final piece of the trilogy. Nemesis was the 3rd and final game. At this point, the team knew how to fully utilize the hardware, and the graphics are the sharpest as a result, which is great considering the real spectacle of this game is getting to explore Raccoon City. The normally familiar setting of a bustling city has decayed into a Crimson B-movie wasteland. There's so many different set pieces and locations, all united by the dismal destruction and hordes of zombies. All the graffiti and debris and boarded windows makes Raccoon City look like Detroit on Halloween. It's such a strong setting that sometimes I feel like this is my favorite Resi game. And the long-awaited remakes of 2 and 3 take more after Resident Evil 4, but since they're based on the oldies and made after 7, they're much scarier than the middle action era. They're definitely the superior games, but the oldies are still worth going back to for both historical reference and their own kind of experience. On a final note, the soundtracks for these games are kind of a mixed bag. They fit the games well enough to serve their ultimate purpose of building a spooky atmosphere, but besides a few classic tracks, it never really passes my test of, can I listen to it on its own? The original series set huge standards in making a game scary, and it wouldn't be bested until Silent Hill. As far as the golden age of survival horror goes, this is where it all begins.
Jill, no. You don't want to go back out there.
If anyone has complaints about this series, this is usually where they lie, and sometimes contradict each other. All things age, some well, some poorly, and Resi has aged both ways. It can be breezy for veterans, but frustrating for newcomers. Inventory management can be monotonous and illogical, hit detection crosses over to enemy lines, puzzles alternate between short bus easy and PhD hard, but the deal breaker is the controls. Classic Resi implements tank controls. I can't be mad because this was the nature of the original PlayStation, but this is the worst of it. Gameplay consists of typical survival horror fanfare, most of which this series established. Exploration makes large use of small areas. You find keys and puzzle items to open doors in progress. They're found in one part of the world and used in another, sending you back and forth. A cool feature in the first two games is the choice to play between two characters, each containing different weapons, level designs, and plot insights. It's an excellent storytelling device with potential replay value that even found itself copied in other games like Sonic Adventure. The level design is brilliant as a result, serving what is basically two mirrored adventures in the same space. Resi 3, meanwhile, featured just one character in a more or less open-world setting, but neither Jill nor the player can savor the fun of exploring it thanks to its central motherfucker.
You'll find her! That's what he does!
Combat can be cumbersome, but just back yourself into a corner with the right weapon and mow them down as they hobble toward you. 2 and 3 swarm the player with way more zombies due to the settings. You get the pleasure of killing more, but it also eliminates the element of enemy evasion. This is also probably the early roots of Resident Evil's future action-emphasized gameplay. Nemesis, of course, famously features a juggernaut that stalked you throughout the entire game and could appear almost anywhere at almost any time.
That's all he does!
Occasionally the scare factor wears off and he just gets wicked annoying.
You were like a giant cock-blocking robot, like developed in a secret fucking government lab.
Resi's great contribution to survival horror, in my opinion, is making the actual gameplay scary. Even though atmosphere is most crucial, many horror games overlook the unique opportunity they have to fuck with the player's mind. The big innovation was the now proverbial limited resources. Basically, you can only carry 10 items at a time. This forces the player to carefully manage their inventory to make sure they have whatever they might need, evade most enemies, and save ammo for the bosses. Use health items at only a sliver of health. This rule extends to everything, further forcing the player to conserve any consumable items, which also include saves. At first, the limited saves pissed me off so bad until I realized just how brilliant it is. It totally raises the stakes, and a lot more rides on your survival. You can't just save whenever you want after every little thing you do. You gotta space them out and try to get a whole lot accomplished between each time you hit the typewriter. The only time it can get annoying is when you want to stop playing but you can't turn off the game until you find the next ink ribbon, but if you skillfully pile them up, it's no problem. The game also grades you based on your time and items used, so if you want that perfect score, you're gonna have to rush through the game while saving and shooting and healing as little as possible. Most Resident Evil games take place in a single night and feature highly skilled player characters, and that's how Capcom wants you to play it. There's other tricks that make the actual gameplay spooky. Pick this key up, it sets off a death trap, so you gotta think quick to replace it with a decoy item. Indiana Jones style. Oh shit, this room is gonna crush you. Stop the shark tank at Secret SeaWorld from cracking open with zero knowledge of hydroelectric engineering. But the best part is when you're just walking down a quiet room that you already cleared of enemies, thinking it's safe, until all of a sudden... These never get old because they constantly mix it up. Crash through the windows, fall through the floor. Bet you think that one's gonna reanimate. Nope, it was that one. You didn't even see it, did you? Oh shit, it's both. Split-second decision-making or it's game over. That makes gameplay hella scary. Some would even say the clunky combat because it disorients the player and causes them to anxiously fumble, but that was really just a side effect from tank controls and tech limits. You know how you can tell when a horror game is really effective? When you don't want to leave the safe room, and so you just dawdle and procrastinate, afraid to make progress in the game, thinking, fuck it man, I'm not going back out there. I'm just gonna stay here, I'm gonna shack up in this room the rest of my life. It'll be fine, we got everything we need in here. Look, we got a bed, we got some medicine, we got the item chest from Paper Mario? whatever. Look, they even got a typewriter, you know, we can,
Working on that novel you've been working on, you know?
But after a while, you sack up and stare a hole into the map, planning the shortest possible route with the least amount of hazards. And it'll still seem like a huge ordeal, even though you're just going from one side of the building to the other. And when you finally arrive, you breathe a deep sigh of relief, and you wish you could just beat the game and get it over with already. This was, and is, what it's like to play
Resident Evil.
Except for that middle part.
Place totally blows my mind. It's so fun, just good entertainment for the whole family.
Resident Evil's story has often been considered lackluster compared to other horror games. Well, that shit ends now. Silent Hill, for example, might be better, but that doesn't make Resi bad. It may not be poetic or philosophical, but it's captivating and complex.
Decent!
The whole overarching chronology is in fact so dope that I'm gonna summarize the hell out of it.
Regale us!
The root of all evil doesn't begin with a mansion, or a company, or even a person, but this, Africanus Majoris, or Stairway to the Sun, a different kind of flower power from subterranean ruins in West Africa. It's a plant that grants powers to those who eat it, traditionally used by the, not even gonna try to pronounce that, tribe in coronation ceremonies. They were forced off their land in the 1960s by the private militia of 3 men. Edward Ashford, a wealthy aristocrat who sought to cure the handicapped. Oswell Spencer, a wealthy aristocrat who sought world domination. And James Marcus, a virologist, and the third guy. The gene-combining properties of the African fauna, which they called the progenitor virus, was key to their goals. Together, they seized control under the facade of a pharmaceutical company called Umbrella. It's a cover business. An umbrella. Get it? Aha! After infecting Ashford with the virus and killing him, Spencer gains more executive power. He assumes the title of Lord Spencer.
Oh, my lord, you should not speak so.
And Umbrella grows into one of the world's largest corporations. Facilities are branched around the world, from Africa and Antarctica to Europe, and a small town in the American Midwest called Raccoon City. With a training facility and Spencer's personal estate in the Arklay Mountains just to the north, Umbrella developed a heavy presence in the town, triggering an economic boom that left 30% of the population under their employment and the politicians and police in their pockets. And laboratories were expanded deep underground beneath the city and its outskirts. Over the next 3 decades, scientists and mercenaries were hired to help Umbrella corner the military market by creating bio-organic weapons, intelligent humanoid creatures specifically designed for warfare. Key among this staff is Albert Wesker, William Birkin, and Alexander Ashford, the son of Edward. The Tyrant virus, or T-virus, is successfully engineered and shortly followed by the Tyrant, the ultimate BOW. The project is then relocated from the African base to the underground labs of Raccoon City. Eventually, Umbrella begins to crumble. Spencer had Marcus assassinated. Alexander is infected by his own twin children, Alexa and Alfred, who were born through the company's experiments. Wesker poses as a triple agent with the STARS division of the Raccoon Police. Birkin takes the project in a more dangerous direction by creating the G-virus, and the many factions of the company begin to clash internally, even with their own BOWs. These conflicts lead to a boiling point in 1998, precisely 30 years after Umbrella's founding. This is where things truly begin, for it is between May and December of 1998 that the original Resident Evil games take place. 10 years after his assassination, Marcus is reanimated and exacts revenge by contaminating the Barclay laboratory with the virus, turning everyone into zombies who slowly wander outside. Grisly murders and disappearances are eventually discovered in the region, and the city dispatches STAR's Bravo team to investigate in the events of the prequel. After investigating the cause and effect with escaped convict Billy Cohen, Rebecca Chambers is the squad's sole survivor and destroys the training facility. Shortly after, STAR's Alpha team is dispatched to search for Bravo team in the events of the original. They investigate the mansion and its underground lab, uncovering the truth about Umbrella and their colleague Wesker. Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, and Brad Vickers are the sole survivors. The mansion and its labs are similarly destroyed along with any incriminating evidence. While Chris goes to Europe, Jill stays in town as they both plan to take down Umbrella. Birkin completes the G-Virus but is taken out by Umbrella when he tries to sell it directly to the military. During this struggle, the virus leaks into the sewer water, which is then carried by rats into the city. Within a week, the outbreak snowballs, and Raccoon City is overwhelmed by zombies. The US government enacts martial law, while Umbrella sends reconnaissance teams to evacuate citizens, recover data, and cover its tracks. This includes an advanced tyrant model tasked with eradicating all members of STARS, with Chris in Europe, Barry in a chopper, and Brad crossed off the list. Jill must evade both Nemesis and the hordes of zombies in the events of the third game. At this very same time, the events of the sequel occur when Claire Redfield enters the city to search for her brother Chris. While aiding a young Shelley Birkin and series anti-hero Ada Wong, she is forced to escape with rookie cop Leon Kennedy after they destroy the labs beneath the police station. After a series of daring helicopter escapes, Raccoon City, population 100,000, is declared a lost cause. The city is annihilated by a missile after being designated a biohazard.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
Spencer goes into hiding. Jill and Barry become militant anti-Umbrella activists. Leon becomes a government agent. Chris and Claire reunite to take down the Ashford twins in the side game Code Veronica, and Umbrella becomes publicly responsible for a national tragedy. With the African, Antarctic, and Raccoon facilities shut down and a government sanction imposed on Umbrella's stock-plummeting business, the story drew to a close. There's so many things I love about Rezi's story. Instead of toying with the supernatural, Resident Evil kinda dabbles in science fiction. Every enemy has an origin, from Nemesis to Lisa Trevor. They even actually say the word zombie. I get so annoyed when characters in zombie things act like they've never seen a zombie thing.
Don't say that. What? That's the Z word.
They call them infected, cannibals, walkers, but by the second game,
The entire city was infested with zombies.
Thank you.
Sure, it's not perfect, but what is? Voice acting is famously cringy, the endings were all directed by Michael Bay. There's some plot holes, like what the fuck happened to Rebecca, but whatever, these things get filled in over time. Video game lore is crafted through the years as the games are made. Then there's the fact that every character is a cop. This is annoying because one,
That's harsh. These are rich, interesting characters.
and two, most horror games star an ordinary everyman because it's scarier to be in that situation, but playing as a cop might make you feel more capable. Rezi's big hook is mystery. Most zombie things show you a glimpse of moments before the outbreak, slap you with a 20 years later title card, and then drop you in a post-apocalyptic world. But in Resident Evil, you get to see the process. The whole chronology slowly unfolds one game at a time, like the George Romero films, and the clue to the game's themes are right under your nose. Well, they don't really hide it, so it's more on the nose. Resident Evil's birth name is biohazard, a biological substance that poses a threat to the health of living organisms, primarily humans. That label can be applied to lots of the game's contents. The zombies and the monsters and BOWs themselves, the chemicals and experiments that led to them, and the humans that knowingly and maliciously conducted the science. Biohazards happened because other biohazards were being created in a controlled environment, and when it all fell apart, they concealed it with more biohazards. How are humans not a bigger biohazard than the zombies they become? Zombies are almost an ironic yet logical conclusion to the chain of events mankind digs itself into. Resident Evil is a story about mankind's most destructive endeavors and the ruthless pursuit of them. The horror story that plays out like a political thriller. Conspiracies, betrayal, corruption, sabotage, collusion. Umbrella doesn't even fire people, it executes them. The government's solution is to eradicate the city along with any possible survivors, and they can't even find a better way to phrase it than pass judgment on the citizens of Raccoon City, like it's their fucking fault.
Well, burn for it!
Resident Evil is about the dangers of the military-industrial complex and the dark ambitions of the super rich.
And I base that on absolutely nothing.
It's about the inherent dangers of biological science and the artificial dangers of bio-warfare, with lessons in resisting it, taking precautions against it, or dealing with the consequences.
Fuck the corporate world, biatch!
The original series was fun, intriguing, and terrifying. It's a survival horror dream that I'm glad I picked up later in life, because just when I thought that I played it all, I'm introduced to something so good that it also happens to be the thing that started the thing that I thought I played all of.
Wow, you need a roadmap for that one.
Eventually, though, it became tried and tired. Like when a band has exhausted itself of all inspired material, but goes on making generic work because they don't want to phone it in. Sometimes, you just gotta coast off the hits. Resident Evil created a voice, but it was becoming a whisper, while other games were shrieking. They would have to either fight back or get eaten alive. And sometimes, I wish it were the latter. Did you think I was finished? This finally brings us to the fourth game, Resident Evil 4. One of the best games ever that I still have mixed feelings about. With the barricading and heavy gunplay and creepy villagers, it's fun and even scary in its own way. Even the over-the-shoulder camera angle is cool in its own way, and it's infected the gaming landscape as fast as a zombie outbreak.
I guess something happened to the left that made everybody happy.
But you have still royally pissed me off, and I'm not going to play with you.
Unfortunately, this extended to all of survival horror, and gone was the cinematic camera work. In fact, less emphasis was placed on atmosphere overall, as horror games began to feel like action games with horror themes.
Talking about this or this? We're talking about this?
Sure, you can say it had some positive effects too.
This or this!
But you know what never happened again?
This one, or this one, or this one.
Thus began the post-Umbrella wars of spooky Resident Evil versus shooty Resident Evil.
Who died and made you fucking king of the zombies? Don't. That's pretty good.
The Middle Era is a trilogy of action games with mild horror themes that focus on the fates of the original cast, a few new faces, and the Neo-Umbrella plot to infect the world with a mind-controlling parasite dubbed Las Plagas, made from the same flower as the T-Virus.
So decent!
The New Era is a hopefully to-be trilogy of first-person adventures that didn't set the trend, but rather followed the current horror game format spearheaded by Swedish indie Amnesia. They continue the series' overarching story through the eyes of a new character named Ethan, and most notably, these games are fucking scary. This felt to me like a homecoming for the series, and I absolutely loved it. And I'm not hating on anyone who enjoys the Middle Era. If you like them, then that's awesome. I'm just saying I personally wish that they never fucking happened.
You idiot, you fool!
So yeah, through all the ups and downs, Rezi and I have had a real love-hate relationship.
You know, I'm so glad I never got involved with you.
Why are you getting so upset? This is not about you.
Yes, it is.
Hey, I don't feel great about this, but I don't hear anyone complaining.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
No more room in hell. The dead walk.
There are only 3 STARS members left now. Captain Wesker, Barry, and myself. We don't know where Chris is.
Resident Evil is many things. A zombie game, a horror game, an action game, a co-op shooter, a trailblazer, a first-person Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a fucking traitor. Resident Evil innovated things, an entire genre, a standardized mechanic, and it likely went on to influence the entire zombie subculture. Resident Evil is one of those series that changes and evolves, and that's fine. I'm into that shit sometimes, but not when it takes everything else down with it. Everything I loved about survival horror that Resident Evil catalyzed is more dead than this fucker. The dense atmospheres, the tense gameplay, the deep stories, all gone. I honor it for birthing my favorite genre, and I cherish my memories with the originals by reliving them every few Halloweens. But I also resent it for killing the genre it created with a game that's ironically amazing on its own. Even now, the genre went from being an action shooter to a first-person adventure that's at least scary again, and even Resident Evil jumped on the trend. So it's not old Resi's fault, it's just the way time goes. Survival horror, like everything else in life, changes. And all we can do is enjoy the new games for what they are and hold on to our cherished old ones. And play the remake of 4. It looks awesome.
God damn it.